So I think we'll start to kick off now. It's starting to level off, the numbers coming in. Welcome, 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 everybody. It's great to see so many of you here. I'm Cath Drake, and the seed for this reading really came out of wanting to celebrate some great books that have been launched during this pandemic year. It's not been an easy year to launch a book, as we know. So I've chosen those who have poems in this fantastic Forward Book of Poetry 2021, those highly commended in the Forward Prizes, who've also launched their collection this year. So you're going to hear from a fabulous range of brilliant and diverse voices. I hope you'll enjoy it, some of which, as I said, you'll know, and others of which I hope will be new discoveries for you, all of which are new work that's come out this year. And I think it's fair to say that without the pandemic, we may not have got everybody together from very different parts of the world. So that is one positive thing. I want you to encourage you to buy the books. If you like the books that you're hearing, I've just put in the post in the chat there a link where you can go in and find out where to buy all of the books for tonight, and also where you can buy the favourite book of the Forward Book of Poetry 2021. So there's a link there, and also a link to my mailing list, because I have lots of other great readings and some masterclasses with some fabulous poets coming up in the new year. So there are 10 readers tonight that will read both from the collection, the anthology, as well as their new books. And first, we're just going to hear just a little bit from Holly Hopkins from the Forward Arts Foundation.
Hello. Cath asked me to say a little bit about the Forward Book of Poetry, because Cath is recording this now so that her audiences currently asleep in Australia will be able to watch it when the time zones are a bit more hospitable. But it means that even though many of you watching this now may be very familiar with this book, there are people who will be watching this who are not familiar with the Forward Book of Poetry and what it is. So basically, Forward Book of Poetry was set up by a man named William Sieghart 30 years ago, next year, and he wanted to create an anthology which would gather together the best poetry published in the UK and Ireland each year. And the idea was readers would read this fantastic cornucopia of poems, fall in love with some of them, and go off to buy the single-authored collections they came from, or subscribe to the magazines from which the poems were taken. So throughout this reading, we'll be putting links to the single-author collections so you can go away and find them. The poems in the anthology are selected through the Forward Prizes for Poetry, which were described in the Daily Telegraph as the Poetry Oscars, which I think is a good way of describing it, because it's lots of different prizes. There's a prize for best collection, there's a prize for best first collection, there's a prize for best single poem from a magazine, but there's also the commendations, and that's what you see in this anthology. It's the poems that the judges from the Forward Prizes for Poetry picked out and they wanted to share with audiences, because they wanted audiences to go away and find those books. So we're honoured to hear from some of the poets in the anthology tonight. And let's go back to Cath so we can start hearing some fantastic poems.
Hey, thanks, Holly. We're going to kick off with Colette Bryce. Her book, The M Pages, is her 5th book with Picador. And you might recall her previous books, The Full Indian Rope Trip, Trick, Self-Portrait in the Dark, The Whole and Rain-Domed Universe, and the latter, of course, draws on her experience of growing up in Derry during the Troubles that was shortlisted for the Costa and the Forward Prizes. Her 2017 selected poems was a Poetry Book Society special commendation, and it won the Pigott Prize for Irish Poetry. Colette is the current editor of Poetry Island Review, and the Irish Times described her book, The M Pages, as a brilliant, moving elegy. Colette Bryce.
Hello, good evening. And thank you so much, Cath, both for that introduction and for organising this lovely get-together. I'd like to congratulate all my fellow poets on publishing their collections in this very strange year. So this is a lovely end to it. And I'm going to, like everyone tonight, I'm going to read 2 poems. And I'll begin with, they're from this book that I published. You might see it sparkle there a little bit, the end pages. And the first one's called The Family Reunion Show. At last, he will meet the lost parent, she who marshalled off her brood and left him in a hostile place to fend for himself with the rough children, far from sight and mind. He'd like to reject the rejecting parent, but he longs for her, longs to be noticed and loved. But his is a futile yearning. The woman who made her Sophie's choice now hates more than anything else to be reminded. So the man rehearses. It's okay, mother, it does not matter. It doesn't matter that the people to whom you gave power over me despised me and starved me. Look, I'm still alive. Today is the day. He arrives early, takes his seat on the set, and straightens his tie. So the second poem I'm going to read is the one that appears in the Forward Book of Poetry this year, which was a lovely happening. It's actually the last poem in my collection. And I remember it was written out of a time of great noise and anger around the Brexit referendum here in the UK. And I suppose compounded by the election of Donald Trump in the US, there seemed to be a lot of kind of oppositional voices going at it all the time. So I think I wasn't the only person having a bit of an escape fantasy at that time. So I guess this poem is a kind of self-isolation fantasy before self-isolation became much less appealing. A last post. My ideal job, inspector of the tide line, the ocean's eyebrow, after the sea has sucked in its breath and closed its lashes. I'd live in a wrecked Bishopian shack, the lion's paw prints massive in the sand, and always in weather like this, in tattered old shorts and a vest, my skin salted. A currency of driftwood and feather, necklaces of wrack, like cured leather, I'd collect in a basket to barter with the wind. With shells and fish hooks, alphabet of bird bone and twig, I'd fashion flotsam poems in my utter element, pottering along, far from the roar and heat of politics. Odd times a hound might spring out of nowhere after a ball, an anorak owner in its wake. Or I'd wave to the lone kayaker, buoyant always as a bath toy in the waves. But really, at home with my own company, I'd be barely curious enough to track those trails of human spore to the point at which they always disappear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's just wonderfully intimate, isn't it? I feel like Colette's reading just to me, which is just delightful. The next reader is Matthew Francis. His 5th book, Wing, with Faber and Faber, is the one he's going to be reading from tonight. It's twice been shortlisted for the Forward. He's twice been shortlisted for the Forward Prize, and in 2004 was chosen as one of the next generation poets. He's also edited W.S. Graham's New Collected Poems and has published a collection of short stories and 2 novels. He lives in West Wales and is a professor in creative writing at Aberystwyth University. Kate Callaway from The Observer has said that nature does not go out of fashion, and we need poetry of this quality more than ever. Wing is a joy. Here's Matthew Francis, who will be reading from his book, Wing.
Okay, thank you, Kath, and good evening. It's a great honour to be included in the Forward Book of Poetry 2021 and to be invited to read tonight. My collection, Wing, from which these poems are taken, is based on the theme of nature and to a great extent reflects my experience of living in the rural setting of Ceredigion in West Wales. But I'm going to start with my poem from the Forward Book, which is based on my life before I came to Wales. This is about the legendary hot summer of 1976 when I was 19. One of the less reported consequences of the unusual heat was a plague of ladybirds. Ladybird summer. That summer there was a rash of ladybirds drifting over the garden in a reddish smoke. We'd find them on the carpet, a smattering of coral beads from a broken necklace, but self-willed, crawling every which way, mating like tiddlywinks. The flowering season for insects. Crickets twitched the grass, moths trembled under their paper dark wings or crouched on the ceiling in the circle of brighter light above the lampshade. And the mosquitoes balanced on the wall, on moonlander legs. Trees split in the heat. We drove through a tawny country, now turned to outback. In the pub courtyard, we talked till the colour drained from the petunias and the hanging baskets, unwilling to go home carrying the weight of the day's air. There was too much summer. The ladybirds that gathered on ledges to be crunched by the closing windows had lost their picture book brightness. We were glad of the first sign of autumn, a bowl of plums, frost blooming on their skin, and tart sunshine in their yellow flesh. And this is a poem that was triggered by a reader's letter in the Notes and Queries column of the Guardian newspaper, which asked why so many spring flowers are yellow. The answer wasn't particularly interesting, but it caused me to write a poem in celebration of the profusion of yellows in spring. I should add that on the coast of South Ceredigion, yellow-flowered laburnum trees have taken over the hedgerows for reasons no one is really sure of, which makes a drive down that coast on a May evening a spectacular experience. Yellow. You crack the shell and think there is yellow in everything. It has claimed a sector of tablecloth, warms your right hand as you go prospecting with a teaspoon for liquid yellow, and scrape a lump of fridge-hard butter across your bread. A few Easter cards stand on the sill with their yolk-coloured hatchlings, beside a vase of daffodils blaring through their megaphones. Not long after the first crocuses fingered through the earth, the lawn is raging with dandelions. Look at the primroses, each with a darker star at the centre, and the forsythia spraying lemon by the fence. What are they warning us about with their high-vis signage? The lane is blazoned with heraldic suns of celandines, and beacons of gorse and broom catch across the hills. It's there in the ring round the eye of a blackbird. The first brimstone of the year, a floater at the edge of your vision, dithers like a sunflake cast by a stained glass window. A bronze thrumming in the cowslips reminds you of honey. You crack the world, and yellow runs out with the green. Next come the buttercup meadows with their millions in gold, and then, one evening in May, you'll drive down the coast with the overgrown hedgerows of laburnum on one side of you, Welsh sheep fields hung with accessories by Klimt, and a blob of yellow on the other, softening into the sea. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Maria Ferguson, who's going to be reading from her book, All Right Girl? I've got to get a question mark on the end there. And I know Maria a little bit because we both read poetry for staff, visitors, and sometimes even patients for a charity called Breathe Arts Health Research at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospitals. And I really hope that we're going to be able to do that again next year. Maria is from Essex, and All Right Girl is published by Burning Eye, and it's her first collection. She has been commissioned by the Royal Academy of Art, Stylist Magazine and BBC Radio. Her debut one-woman show, Fat Girls Don't Dance, won the Saboteur Award for Best Spoken Word, and her follow-up, Essex Girl, won the Show of the Week at the Vault Festival. Joelle Taylor says, "We need more voices like hers. Democratic and challenging, clever, funny, frank and uncompromising." Maria Ferguson.
Hello.
Yep.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Hearing you good.
Good. I can't believe I'm following Matthew Francis. What the hell? And I can't believe I'm in this book either. I'm still in shock and yeah, just so proud and honoured. I never really thought that my poems would make it into print, let alone into an anthology like this. So I'm very, very happy. So thank you, Cath, for inviting me. I'm going to start off by reading the poem that's in this anthology, and it's called My Letters, after Hugo Williams. They are under the bed, burning a hole in the carpet again. I can smell the fabric singe. Cigarette lit from the hob, 18, drunk on tequila I bought to impress you. Forgot the limes. Used a Sif synthetic lemon I found in the cupboard to ease the taste. It's the last thing I remember, that smell of burning hair. Some I have kept for almost a decade. My handwriting has changed a little. They are tired things and sad. They long to be held by your fingers. They want you to understand, but it's been so long and there are so many now. These letters I write and do not send. I think you're meant to throw them away, but I never get that far. They are hiding under bank statements, photographs, receipts, self-destructing, overheating. I taste it on my tongue. Saxa, cheap tequila. You sat on my bed that night, asked me what was burning. And I'm going to read something from my little book. So yeah, for all of the sort of international guests we have, it might seem a quite strange title. All right, girl is kind of like a greeting that I'm very familiar with, being from where I'm from. Sort of, you'd use it to address, you know, a woman, whether she be a young girl or a 60-year-old woman. My mum still gets called girl, all right, girl, which is equally problematic and comforting to me. So I might read, yeah, I think I'm going to read the title poem, All Right, Girl. All right, girl. It's the call of the blokes I know from trading notes for pints of John Smith's. The relief of another living, breathing thing in an empty pub in January. It's a longing for a lost wife or three, a smile as their palm is graced with change. They hold on a little too long. It's the raise of the hand or curt nod when I see them in the street, away from beer mats and tired stories, tired eyes, rosy cheeks, a greeting in a familiar kitchen, the same questions to follow each time, as the poetry, as the love life. It's the cabbie who knows the East End like the freckles on his wife's nose, rolls out names that might impress, Jack the Hat, Billy the Bomb. It's the barman on a Saturday night when I said I'd only have one, and my eyes are red and my mouth is dry, and all I really want is his voice to be my dad's on the end of the line, miles away, killing time, with that question I never know the answer to. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. We're now going to hear from Mina Gorji. Her fabulous book, The Art of Escape, published by Carcanet, is her first collection also, and it was a Telegraph Book of the Month. Her poems have appeared in magazines and anthologies, including the new Blood Axe Staying Human anthology published this year. She was born in Tehran and now lives in Cambridge, where she's a senior lecturer in romantic poetry at the University of Cambridge and a fellow of Pembroke College. Aisha Hutchinson says that here are poems of unsparing clarity, unflinching, each one an acute canticle of remembrance. The Art of Escape marks the beginning of a splendid new voice in British poetry. So with a click of a button, Mina Gorji.
Hello, thanks so much, Kath, for that warm welcome and introduction, and thanks so much for inviting me. It's a real honour and pleasure to be reading in such company of poets I admire and respect, and I'm so absolutely delighted and honoured to be in this collection. The first poem I'm going to read is from my my collection, Art of Escape, and it's about a bird which is native to these islands and can be heard in the reed beds close to Cambridge, where I live, if you're lucky. But it's also described in the Old Testament, so I suppose I felt a sort of kinship with the bittern, a bird which lives in the Middle East, where I was born, and in this country where I live. Bittern. It thrives in brackish water where the sea has broken in marshes and on riverbanks, edges of solid ground. When danger comes, it imitates the reeds, sticking its head up straight and swaying in the wind. A nervous bird, more often heard than seen, its hollow boom was heard at night in ancient and in empty times, in Nineveh and Babylon. The poems in my collection are interested in journeys and transformations and migrations of creatures, of plants, of peoples across seas, across borders, across continents. And it's interested in thinking about these journeys, these migrations at the same scale. The first poem I'm going to read is the one that's in the forward anthology, and it's about a tiny creature that came over to this country. It was brought over for its gall, which was used to make ink. It's the oak gall wasp. I wanted to imagine what it was like for this tiny emigrant to emerge into English light, how it might have felt. So this poem is called The Wasp. The wasp who makes no honey gave us ink. In early spring, oak galls appear. Darkening in autumn, they gestate. Emerging into English light, this tiny emigrant was smuggled in Aleppo oak, an alien acorn. This next poem I'm going to read is about my own journey to this country when I was 5. And I wanted to think about how my journey and the wasp's journey were related to one another. This is called Exit. Airport security was tight the day we left, my sister in a pram and I holding my mother's hand. She was heavy with gold coins and cash, rings, necklaces, anything of worth that could be snuck, hid, stuffed in a sock or slipped into the secret of a heel. The bigger things we left behind. Pinched hard, my sister screamed so loud the chuddered guards just scowled and waved us through, unfrisked. This last poem I'm going to read goes back to the reed beds near where I live, and it's a short poem that's based on lines by the Persian poet Rumi, and it transplants a reed from Rumi's poem into the fens, where it becomes a home for the wainscot moth, among other things. So it's a sort of translation and about translation, and it's called The Song of the Reed. The Song of the Reed. Inside the reed, a wainscot moth winters as an egg. Inside the reed, a secret longing for the wind. Inside the reed, a message gathers into ink. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you.
I now have the honour of introducing Cath. Australian Cath Drake's collection, The Shaking City, was published by 7 Books and was described by Philip Gross as a guide to staying clear-eyed, combative and caring in unsettling times. It follows Sleeping with Rivers, which won the Seren Dyslexia Poetry Pamphlet Prize and was a Poetry Book Society choice. Cath has come second and highly commended in the Poetry School's Ginkgo Eco Poetry Prize, formerly the Resurgence Prize. She teaches poetry in the UK, Australia, and has a growing online programme. She is an award-winning journalist and non-fiction writer with a specialism in environmental issue. She holds a postgraduate qualification in environmental science and is also a mindfulness teacher. Let's welcome Cath as a reader.
Microphone is good. Thank you so much, Holly. That was a bit of a quick, I came in a little too quickly then, but never mind. Yeah, I'm going to read first. I'm going to read the poem that is in the Forward Book of Poetry 2021 from The Shaking City. I love that cover. Oh, it's called Our Front Garden, and I guess the book in itself is all about the shaking. It's kind of change. It's kind of change on a political, personal, and environmental level. That tension between nature and city, or you know, the nature and the built-up environment. And the first poem about Our Front Garden, I guess, is about it's kind of a mysterious poem. I'm really glad that that it was chosen for the anthology, because I'm kind of surprised they chose this one, but I'm really glad they did. It's quite strange and mysterious, and it's kind of a little story. At its heart, I guess, is a yearning for a loss of community and connection to place. I guess I often do see people in my local community and wonder, you know, strangers, wonder what their story is. Our front garden. Every week, she stands in our front garden for at least a few minutes. Her gaze is clouded but focused. There's nothing disingenuous about it. She dresses up, shine shoes, lipstick, a silver brooch, clipping together a coat or shawl. At first, we thought she wanted something. My husband spoke to her several times. My daughter offered her cake, but she didn't take any notice. We left out a comfortable chair, but she preferred to stand. In the 5 years we've been in this house, we've put up a fence, had a paint job, pulled up the rose garden, my husband's new truck pitched on the verge, a tricycle bogged in the herb patch, but nothing fazed her. We noticed that her red coat was getting worn. Then she bought a blue one with a black collar and matching gloves. Perhaps coming here was the first time she wore them. Her gentle humming is a good companion to my husband's gardening. We look forward to seeing her, watching her face change as she steps off the curb into the garden. It marks our week. She's been late by a day or two, only a few times, I suspect for good reason. Out shopping on the high road, I've seen her on her way to our place, and I admit following her more than once. at a respectful distance. There's a satisfying labour in her steps, up the pavement, across the muddy park. Strolling behind, I feel a purpose in life and a little envious. Caught in the traction of my week, she seems to silence me with her presence, so that I wonder if I've lost my way, should be more committed to something or dress better. I'd like to send her a Christmas card, but I think it's not appropriate. And if one day she doesn't come, we wouldn't know what to do, who to tell, how to mark it, and our garden would once again be like anyone's garden. I'm going to read one of the environmental poems in the book called, I think it's fairly self-explanatory, What I'm Making with the World. I'm making a handbag out of the hide of the world. I'd been hunting for something contemporary, unique. It gutted and skinned fairly easily the soil, rivers, oceans, seams of hot tar, broken glacier chips and molten yolk fell out into a pile that I'll take in a sack to the tip. I'd rather not bury it in the yard for the dog to dig up. And there are some nuclear power stations, chemical dumps, explosives, cracked pipelines that could cause complications. Recycling won't work. So I'd rather get rid of the lot, drive it there in the ute and stop off for craft supplies. I've cured the hide, so the pretty mountains, valleys and cities won't lose their colour. I artfully cut around the best bits, the Alps, Machu Picchu, pyramids, Petra, and ditch the ugly stuff. Calcutta, Guatemala, Brisbane, Houston, endless boring tower blocks and deserts, bland wheat fields. My secret is a custom diamond needle. The hide was tough in places. I had to stitch through London to make a pocket, and a charming button obscures half the Himalayas, but it's very stylish. And when I take it to the gala dinner, I'm sure there'll be admiring looks, jealousy, most likely. I forgot to tell you that there's the Australian word in there, ute. You may not know what that is, but it's one of those, it's a kind of a truck with an open tray at the back. Yeah, a ute. So there you go. If you learn one thing, you now know what a ute is. I'm going to introduce Kathrine Horrex, who has also had her first collection out this year, published by Carcanet. It's called Growlery. She's been published in many magazines and journals, including PN Review, Poetry London, Times Literary Supplement, and she currently works as a teaching assistant. Growlery conjures a place haunted by flooded villages, broken ankles, ovarian health, and factories. It dwells on a world of civic tensions in the twilight zone between city and country, the human and natural. It reimagines the growlery of Dickens's bleak house. Welcome, Katherine Horrex.
Hi there. Thanks very much for that introduction, Kath. I'm super happy to be involved in the anthology. The poem that I'm going to read that's from that anthology is called Parliament Fallen, and it's about a social housing development here in the UK, in Sheffield, which is here. It's very well known because of the style of architecture it is, but it's been privatised, and I wanted to draw a sort of weird parallel between that housing estate and the Houses of Parliament. Parliament Fallen. We can afford to know nothing beyond concrete. the concatenate glower of windows. The street below is a shortcut for us, though we hate to be dripped on by clothes horse balconies. Looking up means a view through a dark kaleidoscope where leaden baselines beat at the air with all the thunder of hives. It calls to mind the shuttered instability of hearts. As a disused mall, this polygon could be acceptable. Instead, we wonder if there are people in the hidden parts of the panopticon, waiting to reveal just how brittle they've become. A helter-skelter skeleton, bleach stripped by the sun, the sweet vomit smell of bleach itself. And we consider whether something built purely to function can only fall to ruin. The city's sirens congregating in these quads, where anyone talking talks boldly in a voice that spreads to fill the space, shaped to keep its own community of echoes. This next poem is, in my book I have a poem called Brexit. No guesses, no prizes for guessing what that is about. But I think this next poem I'm going to read is actually more about Brexit than that poem. It's called House of Other Tongues. Day and night, the garrulous stairwell tattles of each departure and arrival. Walls so thin, talk in the house floats through them and clucks opinion on the manner in which you draw your curtains shut. Day and night, in the big kitchens, dishwater falls from raddled sponges, one thick, greasy drip each time you ring. In the lobby, parental letters sit and advise against other than English abroad, and there are adverts offering meetings with someone who can help with accent reduction. A poor voice ne'er carries. Day and night, regional accents are disapproved of the world over by those who want tongues smooth as glass slippers to sound unaffected by whereabouts, for some reason better able to broadcast something equated with knowledge. Day and night, this is the house of other tongues, whole salted fish head with ice in the gills, dried crayfish twirling under tap water like sycamore seed in the sink, the bang of utensils, a strange glossolalia, when day and night the fridges are loaded with sweating Tupperware by those whose tongues stay locked in the mouth's hermitage, light years off from conversation, till they start with laughter and words they didn't know they know. Four muses. What to say to my muse, the power plant, who makes auras for the city's night hours with a sputter of wattage and volts? What to say to my muse, the steelworks, who sends hot blasts down the standpipe for fig trees to thrive in? What to say of the pigments rolled out in testing chambers by my latest muse, the chemical plant? What to say when the power plant hums and clicks and shines like a fairy-lit woodwind instrument? What to say when the belting out of playground pieces gives way to the making of girders for steelworks? What to say when McBride's carpets the roach and makes soft 6-foot dams out of flammable detergent? How to contain them all, do justice to their invention of and disregard for protocol? How to juggle their sweltering egos when I walk where figs leave oily splats on the towpath, street lamps turn pale in daylight, and latex dries in a bucket slung round a rubber plant's tapped green trunk. And then I will finish with a poem about an owl. It's called 3 Minutes Past Midnight. That owl must have called as many times as there are rings in the tree it lives in, a ranging inquiry of who, skimmed into the night with a stammer of branch bark. He shears the air as he hunts. His frosty, cobwebbed, kudzu-covered owlets rasp in the nest of his heart, where they cough up giblety pellets of who and who and who. What aviary my life must seem to him, even after his day crossing some moat-ridden barn where he waited for soft things to scurry. It's not long since I read that plants are able to drain the energy of other plants nearby. The owl swoops to land, no louder than haystacks falling in long grass.
Unmute. Thank you so much. And I'm glad you're all listening and looking out there, because we had a few glitches with the vision and the sound not matching, but I'm sure you all heard the poetry anyway. Thanks for the lovely comments in the feed there. People are really appreciating the readings. I'm going to introduce now Shane McCrae, who is joining us from New York, which is wonderful, to read from his recently T.S. Eliot Prize shortlisted collection, Sometimes I Never Suffered, published by Corsair. It's his 7th collection, and next year the Cleveland State University Poetry Center will release an expanded edition of his first book, Mule. McCrae has received an Ainsfield Wolf Book Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Lannan Literary Award, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and a Whitening Writers Award, probably many more. He lives in New York City and teaches at Columbia University, and Garth Greenwell says about his work, out of personal history, out of the history of an enduring fractured nation, and out of the deep history of language. Shane McCrae, his writing is the most urgent electric poems of his generation. Almost got that right. Thanks so much, Shane McCrae.
Hi, I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, Cath, for putting this together. And thank you to Forward Arts. So I'm just going to read 2 poems from my book, Sometimes I Never Suffered. The book features, there are 2 kind of long sequences in it. One is about a character named the Hastily Assembled Angel. I'm going to start with a poem about him, and that was the poem that was in the forward book of poetry. What is there to say about him? Nothing you need to know. This is called The Hastily Assembled Angel on Care and Vitality. The hastily assembled angel watches. From the air he watches, from that point in the air where years from now the apex of the pyramid he is watching being built will be, invisibly. He watches as slaves roll huge stones from the quarry to the pyramid. The slave who invented the method for moving the stones is dead. The stones that were too big for human beings to move. The angel saw the slave was killed for attempting to correct the implementation of his method, which the Egyptian engineers had not at first completely understood. Though even as his dark blood made the dirt beside them dark, they saw the first board buckle beneath the weight of the first stone. Fortunately, the slave had explained his method often to his fellow slaves, and they could, when they were ordered to, silently make it work. The angel sees the slaves serve their masters most efficiently when they aren't talking to each other, but they serve their masters most quickly just after they have devised a plan to kill their masters. So the other sequence in the book, all the poems are spoken by Jim Limber, who was an historical figure. He was sort of informally adopted in the last year of the American Civil War by the President of the Confederate States of America, Jefferson Davis. Every poem in the book, Jim Limber is speaking from heaven, except for this one, where he speaks from limbo. And this is called Jim Limber Burning Where No Fire Is. Such as I've been, I am, I never was, bad or a good boy, except as I was born, bad like you know the badness in a glass of fresh milk if you leave it in the sun, will be exposed by the blazing inquiry. Bad like the sun won't make it fresher, not bad like a white boy's badness lights the sky with a strange second sun that dies unnaturally from the sky, that while it shines down on him makes the ground he walks a stage. And when it dies, he is himself again. A living Negro never walked a stage. We are the ghosts of who comes after us, and their memorial I bet I was sent to limbo, because whoever watches wasn't sure what good and bad things I had done, but saw the good and bad things millions of Negroes had done before me on my back and couldn't add the figures up, and thought limbo was good enough and not to darken heaven, darker than heaven has to be. Or it might be a storm of Negroes in heaven. I bet whoever watches sees a storm of Negroes piled high, thrashing on my back. Whoever watches sees a pile of Negroes, thinks they're thrashing because it's so many in one place, but the thrashing's all the rush of the eye from one black body to the next, and it's no thrashing in the bodies, but the wrong is in the eye. I bet whoever watches didn't see I had a storm of Negroes on my back, but it was a black cloud, like the black clouds I've seen in the far heaven I've seen from limbo, like the clouds I've seen from which I've seen stars born, such storms as are the glory of the dark. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shane. It's great to have you from New York. Can everybody see me now? Hopefully it's working fine now. I want to introduce Abegail Morley and her book, The Unmapped Woman, published by 9 Archers this year. Her previous collections of The Skin Diary, Snow Child, and How to Pour Madness into a Teacup was shortlisted for the Forward Prize Best First Collection. She's also one of the co-editors of a small independent poetry publisher called Against the Grain Press. The Unmapped Woman explores the attitudes of trauma, mapping the stark new territory that loss leaves behind, where the landmarks of absence overfill with memories, where the missing loom large, casting their unshifting shadow. And Robert Peake says that it transports you deep under the surface of a life to places too often skimmed. Abegail Morley.
Hi, thank you, Kath, and Forward Arts, and congratulations to everybody reading tonight. The poem that was chosen is quite a small poem, and it comes towards the end of The Unmapped Woman, and it's a section that deals with loss and grief after a suicide. And I'm going to read a longer poem that kind of contextualizes the one that was chosen, and it's called Wood's End. I walk as far as the woods, knowing I'll lose myself quite easily in its hush of winter. The skinny fox that bolts from its panic, shifts twigs from its labyrinth of a den, makes me go quiet, almost forget why I'm here. I take night in my stride, collect dogwood, drifting days, keep my own handprints in the pockets of my dressing gown, so I won't be lonely in my slow creep to you. Sometimes it feels I'm coming back to you. You're in the bark of every tree, knotted in its whirl of rings, like the whole wall of snow has packed you in, and you're road mapping your veins in sap, and the gaps in between are empty branches I trail through. When trees are wintered, they stop sharing their tails, bare as a handless glove, when the curl of left and right isn't straightened by the bones of fingers. Tonight in the forest, each leaf's a skull, and I pick through its tiny teeth as if playing truth or dare, and expect you to pull yourself from the sea, hang your clothes on low branches, so tomorrow they'll dry as if nothing has happened. You don't do that. There are no trees where you fell, just cliffs that ricocheted your body, picked your spine, until my memory of you loosens its grip. My tight-lipped face can only imagine the frozen figure of you hurtling mid-air, as if you're trying to run further than cliff's edge, as if dawn will swallow you up, and you'll be nose to nose with the sea that extends its tongue to the very edges of its mouth, but barely knows your name. I take your fall in your van, and we drive like strangers in our inescapable hill starts, park you in a garage that's too small to contain you. And I wait for you to settle, hear a whiff of music split the air in the house. And I say to you, I hate that you did that, and I'm sorry that you did. And you nod and put out your hand. And the poem that was chosen, and I'm really delighted to be reading it tonight, is called Barometer. After the funeral, words were deadpan, slipped down my throat like gullied rain. Today the weather's changed. Someone's placed graph paper against the pane, plotted the day. It peaks around 10. I snake out of sheets, abandon them like a swag of leaves, move across the room with the slow precision of newly oiled machinery. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Lots of clapping, silent clapping out there, I should say. The next reader is Julian Stannard, whose book Heatwave is published by Salt. It's his 8th collection, and he teaches poetry at the University of Winchester. And Christopher Reid says about Heatwave, there's an air of luxurious melancholy about these poems, a languid play of feelings and associations that sets them wholly against the uptight, earnest strain in British writing, and that appeals to me warmly. Julian Stannard.
Well, thank you very much. It's just very nice to be here, to be there, wherever I am. And I'm going to read, in fact, from Heatwave. And thank you to the forward, of course, and thank you to Salt for going ahead with this collection. So the poem from the forward anthology, I'm going to read that first of all, which is called Trolley Man. I spend a lot of time on trains, still do, but sadly, the trolley men and women have temporarily gone. Trolley Man. When someone asks, could I have a sandwich with some cheese in it? I will say, no sandwiches today. And if anyone should ask for coffee, I will say, hot water not working, shocking, isn't it? I will wheel my trolley from one end of the train to the other, smiling magnificently at everyone. And when a lady asks, I don't suppose you've got a piece of shortbread, some lovely, lovely shortbread, I will say, no, my dear, all the lovely shortbread has gone. And this one is a very, very short one called An Itch in the City. A purple slipper in the street, an itch in the city, a bishop in flight. And I'm going to finish with the last poem from Heatwave, which is called Love, and comes at the end, and it's about a little place called Bogliasco, which is a little kind of village on the coast, just outside Genoa, where I used to live. And you have to imagine a little station in the sweltering summer heat. Trains invariably very late or not coming at all. But then sometimes the Freccia Bianca, the white arrow, flying down to Rome, shoots through and shakes everything up. So this is called Love. Those weeds on the tracks in Bogliasco could be eaten by a goat, should a goat be asked to clamber down the hill. I want to call them yarrow, waiting quietly for the white arrow. Yet they're purple, royal purple, a little hoity for a weed, beloved of goats, daydreaming goats. They are sovereign, growing between the tracks, the drummer boys of this quiet station, until the white arrow hurtles through and they swing to the left or they swing to the right as if they were being blasted by an enormous hairdryer. And when the train has shot past, they rattle furiously, a kind of death dance or an act of flirtation, as if to say to the goats on high, come and eat us, lazy, head-butting sweethearts, before we die. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we've come to our last reader. It's gone by so fast. It's been such a treat. Our last reader is Maria Taylor, who is going to be reading from her book, Dressing for the Afterlife, which is published by Nine Arches Press. It's her second collection. Maria is a British Cypriot poet, a critic and reviewer. Her debut collection of poetry was shortlisted for the Michael Murphy Memorial Prize. And she's also created a poetry bingo, which is a quirky set of cards, which are part game and part concrete poem. She's also a keen runner and walker. She lives in Leicestershire, and poet John McCulloch says that Maria Taylor's new collection is exhilaratingly bold. These imaginative poems strike at the edges of form and emotional experience to uncover glittering seams. They are consistently surprising, by turns hilarious and stirring. Dressing for the Afterlife is a cinematic gathering I know I'll replay again and again. Maria Taylor.
Hello, hi. Okay, show and tell bit. This is Dressing for the Afterlife, and short version is it's about what is and what isn't. And my first poem, which is in Forward Book of Poetry, which is why we're here. And thank you so much for having me, and congratulations to everyone reading tonight. It's about time travel, and it's called Loop. Maybe time moves like a figure of 8, surging forwards then back on itself. Light returns from exploded stars. A grown woman could turn a corner and see herself crying as a girl. News flash, our world ends again. The disappearing forest of childhood disappear again. The path curves. It takes the woman back to a dimly lit bar where she meets the same lover again and again. She risks everything once more. They've already met before they've said a word. This next poem, imagine, if you will, a little girl who looks like me, because she is me, sitting in Acton Park in West London with her mum and dad. My parents are from Cyprus, and Cyprus was under the British colonies until 1960. And it's always been a very divided island. And my grandpa died in the 50s, and I know nothing about him. I've never seen a photo of him. And my parents used to tell me stories, maybe when I was sitting outside the pavilion in Acton Park, the pavilion. Under the pavilion's eaves, the year 1930 is carved. They took pride in things when we had an empire, one man's keen to tell me. Not that he would remember, the empire has fallen like rotten teeth. In that year, Bapu would have been 25, with less than twice that to live. How neat this building is, how it reminds us of order and symmetry. Bapu would have known the same flag. Men dressed in shrill whites play bowls. One bowl bumps politely into another, a soft ceramic chink as if to say, excuse me. Its manners rewarded with a round of applause. When Bapu died, he was 47. No photographs, no letters. He was handed down to me like a fairy tale with no happy ending for his widow. He'd had a stroke. The village had no doctors. Yaya rounded up chaos like a sheepdog and raised 6 children. No time for pride. Tea time. The players head into the pavilion. I stay outside. And finally, this poem is quite timely because it's Guardian Poem of the Week, which is very exciting for me because I was not expecting that at all. It's not a normal occurrence, neither is getting in the forward book of poetry. So 2 very nice things to happen in a very strange year, 2 positive things to happen. I think someone in the chat said earlier there were lots of poems about absent parents, and I think this one coming up is for you. And it's completely made up. My stranger. My stranger hangs where the plaster cracked and the ribs of the house show. He's the only stranger I can afford, a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt, smiling for an artist. Nothing to me, but still I hang him in the hallway and call him Dad. Of course, visitors have doubts. I know they know his hair's too light, the eyes too blue. I win them over by recalling our fishing holidays, how Dad slit the belly of a rainbow trout and out slipped a diamond ring for me, a perfect fit. Dad was handy. He met my mother when she broke down outside the Camden Palace and changed her tire without a jack. He made us a sherbet playhouse. We licked its walls to nothingness. He taught my brother harpsichord. Now he's international. You may have heard him on the radio. That's a self-portrait. He never lived to paint us all. What a terrible loss, visitors sigh. I lead them into a living room and whisper, yes. Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations for a lovely event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Isn't it great to hear the Guardian Book of the Week as the poem of the week? I'm just going to mute. There we go. Well, what a fabulous thing to hear so many gems from 2020, books that came out during a pandemic, but there you are, you have them again tonight. Do buy their books for Christmas, because I'm sure that you've got some great uncle or distant relative or not so distant relative that, you know, doesn't know just how much they love poetry. There are lots of diverse voices here, and there's definitely something for everyone. And definitely also, I'm going to put in the feed. The forward book of poetry. Was I unmuted for a little while, or am I all right? I'm good now. Did you hear what I said before? We're good. I must have just clicked the wrong thing. Here we go. Anyway, yeah, so I've just put in the feed now. I was muted for a few seconds, thanks, Joe. It's always good to know. It's sometimes harder to do these webinars because you can't see everything that's going on as much as you can with the others. But thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And just, yeah, do buy the books, as I said, and I put a link in there to my mailing list, because next year I've got lots of more readings. I might do something exciting with Australian writers too, and I've got masterclasses with Malika Booker, who's just won the best single poem in the forwards, Glenn Maxwell, who's shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot's, Mona Arshy, Mimi Kalvati, Di George, who's doing a fantastic workshop on verbs, how to use verbs. Sounds brilliant. So yeah, if you want to find out more about that, then join my mailing list. Thank you to Holly Hopkins from the Forward Arts Foundation for helping get this together and for being there and helping switch things in the background. And thank you to all the readers. I'm going to just read out again. Thank you to Colette Bryce, her book, The M Pages, Matthew Francis' book, Wing. Maria Ferguson's book is All Right Girl. Mina Gorji's The Art of Escape. Katherine Horrex's Growlery. Shane McCrae's Sometimes I Never Suffered. Abegail Morley, The Unmapped Woman. Julian Stannard's Heat Wave. Maria Taylor, Dressing for the Afterlife. And of course, you also heard from my book, The Shaking City. So yeah, thank you. Have a really restful, a really safe Christmas and New Year. And I hope it's packed full of poetry. Lots of poetry love from all of us. I'm Cath Drake, and good night. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
I just want to say a quick thank you to Cath. I'm going to echo her thanks to all the speakers, but also to Cath, who dropped me an email and said, hey, I've got an idea. And what a wonderful idea it was. It's been an absolute joy to listen to everyone tonight. So thank you, Cath, for bringing this together. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.